Hello and welcome to the December 11th, 2025 session hosted by SABR Baseball Cards Committee. My name is Matthew Glidden, and I'm one of the vice chairs focused on events for the Baseball Cards Subcommittee of SABR. SABR, of course, covers a wide range of all manner of baseball interests, whether it's research, whether it's tracking the current game, whether it's tracking the history of the game, and then everything that one can bookend around those two ideas. I'm joined here tonight by Jason as my personal backstop. Jason Schwartz is also one of the key players at the baseball card committee level. This is the second event that we've already had this week, and I encourage you, if you enjoy these baseball card events, to keep an eye on the SABR schedule. We will post as well in advance as we have scheduled any of these that are deeper dives into the hobby, that are investigations of either collections, as we did earlier this week. We did some super collections from people focused in the New Jersey area. And we look forward to interacting with anybody who has these deeper questions about what it is to be a collector, why you collect what you do collect, and when you want to build a larger set of people who are interested in talking and researching together. What does that mean? Tonight, we're joined by Phil Rosenzweig, who's put together an especially interesting combination of information about the 1912 season. Geez, well over a century ago now. That the first season that Fenway Park was built and put the American League product on the field. Big year, right? It's the longest serving still running ballpark in Major League. And then all of the cards that go along with that from what are called the triple folder set. There is a great book version of it that Phil has put together. But for us specifically tonight, over the next hour, we'll be covering this from his perspective on the stories behind the cards and the stories of the players that you see, and even some of the stories that might be hidden if only you're looking at the card itself. So I'm happy to welcome Phil to present exactly what he'd like to cover. And a reminder that if you have any questions, post them in the chat and we'll get back to them. Or raise your hand and we'll cover it once he's done with his main portion. All right, Phil, anything else you'd like to say before we start?
No, I'm ready to go. Thank you for the introduction, Matt, and hello to Jason also. So we've been in touch, and thank you very much for the nice review of the book. Um, I've been a longtime member of SABR. I have not been a member of the baseball card group. I probably should have been because I was a collector for many years, but I haven't been a very active collector recently. But I did put together this book about the T202 set, and so I want to spend some time going through that with all of you tonight. I've got a number of slides. There's a lot about the set and the way it's structured, the way it's organized, the photographs that I'm going to go through. There'll be time for questions. Also, if anybody's interested in these slides, I can save them in PDF format and I can send them off to you. So I'll give you my email address at the end if anybody is interested in that. So I think with that, I'm going to see if I can share the screen and call up this presentation. Is that working well? Everybody see this now?
Yep.
Okay, terrific. So you may be familiar with the T202 set. It's not a set that gets quite as much attention or love as I think it deserves, but there's no accounting for tastes here. But I'm going to take you through quite a bit about the set. The way I want to begin this, though, is with our old friend, the American Card Catalog, that was put together by Jefferson Burdick and a few others. This is my copy. This is the 1960 copy. I think there was some before that. And of course, they were interested in all kinds of cards and collectibles, advertising inserts, all sorts of things that had nothing to do with sports. The one page that speaks to what I think our interests are is this page, page 64. And here they have designated T200 numbers for sports issues that were inserts in tobacco. One of the mysteries, I think it's a mystery, maybe somebody knows the answer to this, is why various sets were given these numbers. It was not chronological, it's not alphabetical. And the three that we're going to talk about today, very briefly, T206, which is the most famous, which came out before T205, which came out before T202. So that's what we're going to spend time on now. Again, I've written a book and I talk a lot about the baseball season, 1912, all these things. But for this group, because of, I think, our common interest, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the 1912 baseball season. I'm going to spend time really on this set of cards. And I'm also going to spend most of my time on the fronts of the cards, not the captions on the back. And the reason for that is that I just think visually, to have this zoom format, it's a lot easier to be looking at the fronts than the backs. But I'll spend a bit of time at the end to say something about the captions. So let's begin this way. I think everybody knows the T206 set, and here's a few examples. Some people call this set the monster. It's very big, very vast, multiple cards of many prominent players, and very beautiful set, very popular set. The backs had just the brand logo of the cigarettes. So many Piedmont, many Sweet Caporal, and then, of course, many variations. There's people who like to collect the backs, the variations. From my standpoint, they're interesting cards. I don't find them visually as interesting as some others, and there's no captions at all. All you have is the name of the player. So this is the T206 set that is, of course, very popular, very well known, partly, I think, because of the Honus Wagner card, but you all know that story. These were issued in 1909, 1910. They might have still been on the market after. I don't really know when they were discontinued. But importantly, in 1910, there were there were photographs taken by the Paul Thompson studio in New York. I think when teams would come to New York, whether National League teams or American League teams, either they would visit the studio or I think maybe the photographers would go to the park. And so there's this extraordinary set of photographs, very high resolution photographs taken of almost all the ball players. So here's Johnny Evers. And if you're interested, by the way, these are available in the public domain. If you go to this website, Library of Congress, you will see all of these, and you can download them in various resolution. So this isn't something that I have that nobody else does, but I did use these in the book because these were the photographs that became the basis of the T205 cards. So here's an example of how these portraits that were taken in 1910 were used by the 1911 Spalding Guide. There were 2 pages for every team. And so you see here Johnny Evers, but then you also see many other players. I circled the ones here whose photographs were used in the T205 set. Not everybody, but many. So what happened next in 1911 was these photographs were then adapted for the T205 gold borders that many of you will know. And you can see what the artist did here. Johnny Evers now it looks a little bit friendlier. His cheeks are a little bit fuller. They're a little bit rosier. He's a little more friendly look. This is a guy who was known as the human crab, partly because of his demeanor. Well, he looks a little less crab-like when the T205 artist was done with him. But you will also see on the back of the card now, for the first time, the logo for the Sweet Caporal is smaller, and you've got a caption now about Evers. And for the first time, we also see some statistics. For position players, you had games played, batting average, fielding average. For pitchers, you had games, wins, losses. Well, that was the T205 set, and there are, 206 or so of those. Issued in 1911, and a very close relationship between the Paul Thompson studio portraits, the Spalding Guide, and then the T205 set. For 1912, they did something different. So they took the T205 card, but now they used that as one of the end panels on the T202. And this is the set that we're going to be spending most of our time on today. You'll see that that beautiful gold border is gone. It's now a white border. But what you have on this card are 2 end panels that are pretty much the T205 cards, slightly different in some ways, but they flank a center panel, which is the first example, to my knowledge, of fast shutter speed photography on baseball cards. And most of these are game action photos. A few are posed on the sidelines in foul territory, but most were taken at the time. And you see here, because it was fast shutter speed, you've got the dust flying up. You might have a ball that's caught in flight. You can also see the foreground. The grass is very close because the cameras were big and heavy and tended to be placed on the ground. We'll spend some more time on that. So this is what we had in 1912, and this is the T202 set. Also, you had now very extensive captions on the back. The Hassan logo is restricted to about the bottom quarter of the page, and you've got on each end panel, you've got some text about the player, and then the center panel has a caption. Here, Evers makes a safe slide, and you've got text there as well. If you take all of the text on all of the cards, you really have quite a document, and I personally found that very informative and very interesting. What I wanted to do in my book was do an annotated presentation of this set, the end panels, the center panel photos, but also the backs of the cards. And so that's what we'll be talking a little bit about today. Um, Let me then show you how these cards were folded. It's a triple folder because there's a crease between the center panel and the two end panels. And if you fold that over, that will then fit into a package of cigarettes. These were the Hassan cork tip cigarettes, one of the brands of the American Tobacco Company. I think one of the first that had a filter. Most cigarettes then did not have filters. Now, of course, I don't know, they've got this sort of fiber in a filter, but this was one of the first efforts to have something that would smooth the smoke, cork tip filters. I don't know what other packages were like. I don't know how wide or narrow they were, the ones that the T205s and 6s came in, but these were certainly wide enough packages to accommodate the T202 when it was folded over. Okay, so that's a little bit about the origins of the set, the evolution of the set. Let's come back now and resume what we know from Jefferson Burdick. So here he talks about the T202s, and what did he say? He said there are 76 different center photos, 144 different end panels, the latter used in many mixed combinations. Well, what does that mean? Well, we're going to go through that now because this is a very complex set in terms of how it is organized. So a few basic facts here. First of all, he's correct. There were 76 different center panels. They each had a caption, and somebody somewhere put them in a checklist, designated them by alphabetical order of the center panel. I'm not sure if Burdick did that. It's certainly not in this book. Maybe somebody else did it. Of the 76 different center panels, 52 appear in the set with one and only one set of end panels, and they are designated by a number and no letters because there's just the one. So there's card 2, there's card 4, there's card 5. But there are 24 cards that show up with more than one end panel, and they will have a number and then letters. For example, 1A and 1B. So those are your 76 different center panels. We'll talk more about that. These 144 different end panels, well, interestingly, there are 137 different players, managers, and there's one coach. Of those 137, 6 of them have two different portraits. And then there's one, Art Devlin of the Giants, who appears with two teams, the Giants and then the Rustlers. I'll show you that later too. So if you add 137 plus 6 plus 1, that's where you get the 144. And Burdick was correct. They already knew that a long time ago. There were these 76 center panels, 144 different end panels. What he doesn't say, but he could have, was that there are 132 cards in all, but they're not numbered. When the set was issued, there were no numbers, there was no checklist issued at the time, so that had to be induced by people later. And at least since I've been collecting these many years ago, the checklist of the set is correct and is complete. I don't think there's any variations that have come along, except for one that we'll talk about. Sean Brennan knows about this. There's one color variation on one card. But they were not numbered, and there was no checklist created. And as Burdick says, they are used in many mixed combinations. This is what makes the set so intriguing, but also so complex. So, what can we say about that? Well, there are only 7 cards in the set that are what I call triple unique cards. That's my term, which means that card has a center panel that appears nowhere else and end panels that appear nowhere else. But the other 125 cards have some combination. So let's go through. I'm going to show you a little bit about how the set is structured. Here are a few examples of what I'm going to call triple unique cards. Here's card 46, Jake Stahl guarding first, Eddie Cicotte, and Jake Stahl. Very typical in this set. If you had a center panel about a player, the designers tried to have the end panel with the same player. So Jake Stahl is in the middle and he's on the side. And then they take a teammate, another Boston Red Sox, Eddie Cicotte, and that completes the card. Cicotte was with the Red Sox at the beginning of the year, then he went on to the White Sox, and we know what happened a few years later. So that's an example of a triple unique card because this card 46 is the only one that has Eddie Cicotte, only one that has Jake Stahl, and it's the only center panel, the only card with the center panel. Here's another one, card 66, Stone about to swing. This is George Stone, retired, no longer even playing on the St. Louis Browns, paired with 2 Chicago Cubs, Jimmy Sheckard and Wildfire Schulte. Okay. And here's a couple more that are triple unique. I won't show them all to you, but Ambrose McConnell at bat, Walter Blair, Jack Quinn, and then one of a couple Cincinnati Reds who are flanking a photograph of George Stovall at first. So interestingly, I'll say a little bit about why you have National Leaguers flanking somebody on the Cleveland Nats in a moment. But these are examples of triple unique cards. I've shown you 4. There's 7 in all, but that's all. Every other card has some kind of combination. So typically, very common in the set, you have something like this. So here are 2 center panels that show Kid Elberfeld of Washington. On the top one, you see him sliding into third base at Hilltop Park. On the bottom one, you see him playing third base at Cleveland. And in both cards, Elberfeld is matched with one of his teammates, Clyde Millan of Washington. Those are the only cards that have those 2 guys, but they are shown, they're the end panels of both card 33 and 34. So this is quite typical. Here's another example. Here you've got center panels with Tris Speaker and Tris Speaker to the right matched with Smokey Joe Wood. And so 2 teammates of the Boston Red Sox flanking a center panel of Speaker. But that's not the only ones that Speaker is in. Wood is only on these 2 cards, but Speaker is also on these 2 cards. Again, center panels of Tris Speaker. Now he is paired with Clyde Engel, a teammate on the Boston Red Sox. So this is what some of the irregularities or asymmetries of the set. You've got multiple speakers. You've got him with different teammates. A little bit more of this just to give you a sense of some of the variations here. Here's Fred Payne of the Chicago White Sox, but he's with a center panel that is supposedly Ed Sweeney of the Yankees putting out Ed Walsh, the runner. That's said to be Ed Walsh. And Payne is with Ed Walsh, one of the pitchers on the White Sox, in the upper card. And then the bottom card, 22B, with Doc White. So again, you see they've got White Sox with a different center panel in the center. A few more examples just for fun. Here's an interesting one. There is no end panel of Napoleon Lajoie. There was no T205 of Napoleon Lajoie, but there's a center panel of Lajoie. This is card number 3 called A Great Batsman. And he was a great batsman, so they've got a nice center panel of him. They've got Brooklyn Dodgers, or here they're called Superbas, on the end panels, and Bill Bergen is in both, with Ed Barger on the top one and Knapp Rucker on the bottom one. So if It would be a triple unique if Barger was not on the other one, but he's shared. So again, you've got one player with two end panels. A few more, just for fun. This is an interesting one because it's an example of a player, same player, that has two different portraits. This is card number one. Alphabetically, it's the very first one, a close play at the home plate. And you've got Bobby Wallace, who was then the player manager of the St. Louis Browns, one portrait of Wallace in the top card with Laporte, and a different portrait of Wallace on the bottom card with Barney Pelty. By the way, the card on the bottom I thought was just a wonderful representation of what this set is about, with very nice, handsome end panel portraits and a brilliant close-up action shot in the middle. So this was the card I put on the cover of the book. Some people have said, why didn't you have Ty Cobb or Christy Mathewson? Well, if I had Cobb, you'd say, why not Mathewson? If I had Mathewson, you'd say, why not Speaker? So I thought, well, let's just have something that captures the beauty of the set of cards, and that's why I have this one. But again, you'll see some of the irregularities and asymmetries in the presentation. Another example here, Dick Hoblitzell of the Reds with teammates on the Reds. The upper card, you've got Eddie Grant, and the center panel has Eddie Grant making a tag at third base called Grant Gets His Man, with Eddie Grant on the end panel. The bottom one, you've got Dick Egan to the right, and a center panel that has nothing to do with them. You've got Dode Chris, who was a pinch hitter for the St. Louis Browns and by 1912 was retired. Why do we have Cincinnati Reds around the St. Louis Browns? I'll tell you a bit about that in a moment. Here's one more that is, I think, particularly interesting. So here's Walter Johnson. Walter Johnson appears on two cards. The top one, called Birmingham Gets to Third, he is paired with Gabby Street. And you'll notice Walter Johnson is with Washington. Gabby Street is with New York. Oh, that's one of the very few cards where the players are not on the same team, but they were on the same team because Gabby Street was the longtime catcher for Walter Johnson with the Washington Senators. And when the card was composed, I believe he was still with Washington. But in February of 1912, he was traded to the New York Yankees, New York Highlanders, for Jack Knight. And so I think they changed the team designation of Street, but they released the card. But then they came up with a new card at the bottom, and now here's Walter Johnson to the right with Jack Knight, who is listed as a Washington American, wearing a Yankees uniform. And you can see the upper card, Street is wearing the Washington uniform, same as Walter Johnson. So you get an idea of when the cards were designed and how, when there was a trade made, they were able to make a modification for release of the next card. But here you have the two Walter Johnsons. All right, I think I'm going to show you one more and then we're going to move on. Here's an example of the same center panel with different end panels. The center panel is called the athletic infield. Here you have the famous $100,000 infield of Connie Mack. You've got Jack Barry, Eddie Collins, Home Run Baker, and Harry Davis left to right. And they are posing. They're on a couple cards here with two pairs of athletics. So at the top, you've got Jack Barry, Home Run Baker. At the bottom, Krause and Ira Thomas, the catcher. But this is an example of a card where they released not just two versions, but four versions. So you not only have these two with the athletics, but they also released it with two Chicago Cubs, Three Finger Brown, Mordecai Brown and George Graham, and then two St. Louis Cardinals, Arnold Hauser, Ed Kenichi. Again, why are we seeing Cubs and Cardinals with Philadelphia Athletics? I'll get to that in a moment. So you've got four cards for 70 A, B, C, D, but it doesn't just end there. Here's an example of a card that's got five different end panels. And so here we've got Johnny Evers. Evers makes a safe slide. Evers to the right, Jimmy Archer to the left. But then here's Evers with Frank Chance. Here's Orvie Overall with Archer. Here's Ruleback and Archer. And then here's this card, 36E. You've got, interestingly, Tinker, Evers, and Chance left to right. So I think for Sean Brennan, who's watching, who's a big Cubs fan, this probably warms your heart to see Tinkers, Evers, and Chance together. And so that's a real beautiful card. They did have a center panel of Johnny Evers, which allowed them to have a center panel of a Cub with Cubs on the side. But a reason why we had on the last one two Cardinals with the Phillies is because you have very few game action photographs of National League action after 1909. I'll say more about that in a moment. Five cards issued for 36, but the most was card 48. Card 48, called Just Before the Battle. Here's this great shot of John McGraw shaking hands with Harry Davis before the start of the 1911 World Series. The New York Giants figure very prominently in the set. They, the Cubs, the Athletics have the most players, and this center panel seemed to be irresistible to combine with lots of different Giants. So you've got the first one, you had Ames. Now you've got McGraw with Roger Bresnahan. Not the same team, but a former teammate and two managers. You've got Otis Crandall with Chief Myers. You've got Josh DeVore with Beals Becker, Arthur Fletcher with Christy Mathewson, and it goes on. Here's Marquard with Myers, McGraw now with his old teammate on the Baltimore Orioles, manager of Detroit, Huey Jennings, Myers with Mathewson, Snodgrass and Murray, and then finally Wiltsey and Myers. Um, Chief Myers is depicted on more end panels than anybody else. The catcher of the Giants appears with pretty much the whole pitching staff, and many of them on this center panel. So that's the record. If you've got 48, you've got 48A through J. So what I've tried to do is give you an idea of some of the irregularities and asymmetries, the various combinations that make this set rather complex to understand, but I hope this clarifies that a bit. Let me move on. I'd like to spend some time and talk about these center panel photographs. They were, as I said, the first examples of fast shutter speed photography on baseball cards. And what you had at that time was the advent of cameras that could capture up to 1/1500th of a second. So you're able to portray things that had never been portrayed before, stop action images of balls in flight or dust kicking up. However, there were not yet telephoto lenses. So what this means is that almost all the photographs were taken by photographers who were positioned either right next to first base or right next to third base. You have no photographs, no center panels of outfielders making a catch or pitchers on the mound or a shortstop going deep in the hole or anything like that. The game photographs are mostly from the American League. And the reason for that, this is what I was alluding to earlier, is that as of 1910, on-field photography was prohibited in the National League. I'm not sure why. My guess is, you've got somebody who chasing a pop fly collides with a photographer. For whatever reason, the National League said, we don't want that. And so most of the game action photos, most of the center panels are from the American League and two parks in particular. Where we do have National League center panels, they are from before 1909, and I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. So, center panel photos taken with these great cameras called the Press Graflex. And so here's an image of photographers. You had a lot, that's at the Polo Grounds. They're running around with these big boxes. And here's a photo of Germany Schaefer, who loved doing anything for a laugh. There he is holding one of these, but they're big, they're bulky, they're heavy. And so the photographers tended to be crouching in foul territory near first base or near third base. The 1912 Spalding Guide has a number of photographs that you can see in the guide, but then they're also on some center panels. And most of them were taken either at Hilltop Park in New York by Charles Conlon or at League Park in Cleveland by Louis Van Ooyen. So let's talk about them. Hang on. Before I get there, what I've tried to do in the research of the book is find as many original photographs in large format, uncropped, and high resolution, and I put those in the book so you can see where the photos came from. Of the 76 center panels, the one that everybody knows is this very famous image of Ty Cobb stealing third. And so here's the uncropped shot that Charles Conlon took. And you can see how they not only cropped it, but the umpire is not there. Actually, maybe he wouldn't even be there where they've done the crop, but there's others where they've removed the umpire. That's one example. But I tried to find many more, and some of the people on this call and some other people who've been very helpful have furnished some high resolution images that I included in my book. So here's an example. We showed you this card that was this center panel that appears 10 times. Well, this is the original photograph. And you can see that Tommy Connolly, I think, is the umpire there, and they airbrushed him out. So there's a number of examples where when you compare the original photograph with what appears on the card, they removed something to make the subjects more prominent and emphasize what they wanted to show. So that's one photograph I included. Here's one. This is, by the way, the last baseball card during the career of Cy Young. And that photograph, called Lobert Almost Caught, was taken at West Side Ball Grounds, National League, but 1907. This is one also from a National League park, card 69, Tenney lands safely. Fred Tenney, who was no longer playing in 1912, but it's a beautiful image. That's the Polo Grounds in 1908. But after, and finally, then I have this one of 1909. This is Grant Gets His Man. I showed you the card earlier. Eddie Grant, he's wearing an armband, by the way, because the president of the National League had died in, I think, July of 1909. And for the next month, National Leaguers wore these armbands. That is taken in Philadelphia at the stadium that was later called Baker Bowl. And if you were to hop that fence in the background and go over the wall, you'd be on Broad Street in Philadelphia. So I showed you 1907, 1908, 1909, but after that, we have no National League images. Most of the game shots from 1910 and 11 were taken at American League parks. Uh, here's one more just that I thought was quite interesting. I found a corresponding photograph of the athletic outfield. The athletic infield is on the card, but Charles Conlon, who was based in New York and rarely left New York for his work, did go to attend at Shibe Park in Philadelphia the World Series in 1911. And before, I think it was the second game of the series, he took these shots of the starting infield and then the starting outfield. You have left to right Briss Lord, Rube Oldring, and Danny Murphy. Well, aside from those, far and away the most cards, the plurality of the 76 center panels were taken either at League Park by Louis Van Ooyen or at Hilltop Park. So there had been a stadium here at this location before 1910, but it was a single deck, one of the old wooden structures. In 1910, they opened this concrete and steel two-deck stadium with a very striking architecture, which you will see on many on many of the center panels. So here are a couple examples where you see the stands that are very clearly League Park, and this is George Stovall playing first baseman of the Cleveland Naps. If you were the first baseman of the Naps, you are a star of this set because you're featured quite a bit. If you were the first baseman of the Yankees, the Highlanders, which is Chase, you're Hal Chase, you're also a star. So these are taken at first base. These are taken at third base. at League Park by Louis Van Oyen. One of them called Birmingham's Home Run. He's rounding third base. And the bottom one, you see that very distinctive high fence along the right field wall at League Park. This is called Lord Catches His Man. And if you look closely, only in the last 15 years or so, it has been understood that this person is Shoeless Joe Jackson. And that was ascertained by comparing it to a photograph that appeared in the newspaper, one of the Cleveland papers the next day, same play, taken just a few feet apart by another photographer, but clearly the same play and definitively Shoeless Joe Jackson. So Jackson does not appear in this set on an end panel, and he's not even mentioned on this panel. He's just called the runner, but it turns out to be Shoeless Joe Jackson. And for people who try to collect him in cards, this has now become a very popular card. All right. Hilltop Park, New York. This is where Charles Conlon spent a lot of time. He also was at the Polo Grounds a lot, but the Polo Grounds, as we said, after 1910, you could not have on-game photography. But if you look at this postcard, you will see kneeling or crouching right off the third base and right off the first base, you will see photographers. Who knows? Maybe one of these is Charles Conlon. We don't know, but this is where he would have been when he took that great picture of Ty Cobb stealing third, and where he took a lot of photographs of Hal Chase at first. So at first base, the top one, again, this is Jake Stahl guarding first. The bottom one, Hal Chase guarding first. But these are taken by Conlon at first base, looking out in that direction. There are also ones at third base. The top one, called Hal Chase Too Late, you're looking out towards in the distance, you will see these apartment buildings. They were called the Carrollton Apartments when they were first built, and they are still standing. They are at Broadway and 169th Street. And if you go to New York, you can stand in front of them. But where the park had been is now Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, this enormous structure. So you will never see this angle of those apartments again. You can stand close to them and look up at them, but you can't see them from this distance. The bottom one, Moriarty spiked, similar position as the Ty Cobb. And there are a couple examples of photographs taken at home plate. This one that I showed you earlier, probably a posed shot, or maybe he snapped it and then dashed away. I don't think he'd want to stand there when a batter was at bat, but they did manage to get some plays at the plate, including this one that's called Sweeney Gets Stahl. So these are examples of photographs. There are many at Cleveland's League Park and at Hilltop Park in New York. Now, I'm gonna in the research of this book, I also solved a puzzle that had been nagging at me for a while. This we know 16A's at Hilltop Park. This is Chase guarding first. But there's a couple other center panels that talk about Hal Chase. This one, Chase gets ball too late. Chase dives into third. Well, where were these taken? For a long time, I assumed, well, these must also be Hilltop Park, New York. I mean, it's Hal Chase at first. And if you look in the background, you say, well, what are those rickety stands? Well, I guess that was what Hilltop Park must have been like. Maybe that house in the distance too. But I wasn't really sure. And not just these two, there are a couple others on the bottom that are taken from the same vantage point. And the Yankees are playing a team with a dark uniform that didn't look like a major league uniform, and those caps look a bit odd. So I really wasn't sure where these were taken. But as I was reaching out to collectors and asking them, do you have any photographs that show the center panels of T202s? Just about a year ago, I got a reply from a gentleman who said, oh, I have the center panel, the original photograph for card 15, Chase gets ball too late. Well, can you send it to me? Sure, here it is. So there it is. And by the way, I'm not sure if Chase is getting the ball too late. I'm not sure he's getting the ball at all. It looks like the ball went right past him there, but that's a small point. The fellow who gave this to me is named Darren Dixon. He might be with us today. And he said, this appears to be taken during 1911 spring training at Athens, Georgia. By the way, Darren knows a lot about identifying old baseball photographs. If you go on his website, you will be astonished with what he has. And I asked him, "Can I put your name and website?" He said, "Yes, please do." Well, once I knew that, I did a little search. I said, "What can I learn about spring training in Athens, Georgia?" And bingo, what shows up but this photograph, which I was able to buy a copy of, not an original. Well, look closely here because that house is that house, is that house. And so I'm going, oh boy, look at that. Those two are obviously from Athens, Georgia spring training. And not just that, if you look at these rickety stands, well, there are the stands, and there are the stands. And the one at the top is Ford putting over a spitter. I had never stopped to think where that was taken. This is Russ Ford of the Yankees, apparently taken there as well. So it appears as if there are as many as 6 center panels that were taken at the Athens, Georgia spring training, and at least one, and I think all of them are credited to Cy Seidman. When I say credited, Cy Seidman at that time was about 18 years old. I think he went down there with a camera. He was apparently not able to be right next to first base, but he was down the line a bit, so they all have this vantage point from beyond first base looking back. He later got into being a distributor of not just photographs, but American memorabilia. So they're credited to his agency. Did he take the photograph? I suspect he did, but I don't really know. All right, let's move on. I just have a little bit more and then we'll stop. Other stadiums. I mentioned many League Park, many Hilltop Park, but occasionally you find others. So here's Sullivan puts up a high one. And Billy Sullivan is wearing a White Sox home uniform 1911. And you have these very distinctive arcades of old Southside ball grounds, which later became Comiskey Park. So we can identify where that one was taken. Here we have Hartzell strikes out and the very distinctive left field bleachers of Shibe Park in Philadelphia. So where I can, I've tried to identify the parks. Are there rare cards in the set? Interesting question. When Lou Lipsett did his book, he said this is a rare card, and for many years as I was collecting, this would be more expensive than others because it was said to be rare. I'm not sure that it is. There's another card, 72, the Scissors Slide, again, Birmingham and Turner. Well, if one's rare, should the other one be rare? I suspect they're both common, so I'm not sure these are rare at all. If you look on PSA, they have populations of cards, but that, in my mind, is deceptive because they only know what people send in to have rated, and what people send in to have rated may be the rarer cards. I don't know. But I'll tell you which are the rarest cards. And there's no question about this, and the prices bear this out. And these are some of the cards that I don't have. Of the 132, I'm missing 3 cards, and some of them are here. So why are these rare? Well, there are 2 cards, card 29 called Devlin Gets His Man, and card 74 called Too Late for Devlin. They've got Art Devlin with Christy Mathewson. What's going on here? If you look at this, 29A, Devlin is with the Giants. If you look at 29B, he's with the Rustlers. What's going on here? Well, when they composed the set, he was with the Giants. He was the longtime third baseman of the New York Giants. But in April of 1912, his contract was sold to the Boston Rustlers, apparently in time for the set designers to make a modification. And so this card came out, Giants and Rustlers, and they're both rare, but of them, the one with Devlin on the Giants is by far rarer and much more expensive. What I tried to do in my book is make sure that I have every center panel and every end panel, and they're all high resolution scans. All but one are my cards. I did the scanning myself. They're very high resolution. One I had to take off the internet, and I think it was one of these, but otherwise, but those are the rare cards. All right. Very briefly, I'm going to say a couple words about the captions. My book, I go in depth on the captions because that's one of the really charming things about the set, in my view. But the only thing I'm going to say here is the captions have things that I was intrigued about and I looked into. And I'm just going to mention one on this card, and that is a mention of Christy Mathewson. It says, absolutely subduing the Athletics. Well, we know he did that in the 1905 World Series, but then it says mowing down the Yankees in 1910, 14 in one game. Well, for heaven's sakes, when did he play against the Yankees? They never met in the World Series. There was no interleague play. What's going on? When I looked into that, I found that indeed, in many cities that had two teams, St. Louis, Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, I don't think Boston, if neither team was in the World Series, they often would meet at the end of the year in what was called the City Series. Strictly speaking, these were exhibition games, but don't kid yourself. They mattered to the fans, they mattered to the players, they mattered a lot to the owners. They had great attendance. And in 1910, in the City Series that matched the Highlanders or the Yankees against the Giants, Mathewson was dominating. And so that's what that is about. And I bring that out in the book. That's one of the many little points that I try to annotate. The other one that I'll mention is this card, Chief Bender waiting for a good one. One of the things you see when you read the text, the captions, is how player performance was understood and measured. Batting average, of course, that was around. Wins and losses, that was around. But there was no such thing as runs batted in yet in 1912. So they talk about this person's a big run producer, but they didn't count RBIs. And here at the bottom, it says in opposing batsmen made 66 runs off him in 216 innings. Earned run average was not yet an official statistic in 1912. It was introduced a year later by one league and then the year after by the next. But there was already an intuitive sense that there had to be a way to measure pitcher performance besides just wins and losses. And so you see here the hint of ERA, but it had not yet been formalized. Okay, that's that's my presentation for you. I've put it together in this book called One Splendid Season. I'll show you one example of a page so you can see what I did. On every page, I have a card, and then I have under it the back captions, the back panels under the appropriate front panel. And then I have annotations. So I will take some quote from the center panel caption or the end panel caption, and I'll say something about it. I talk about the games as they're going on, the dates. This is opening day, April 11th. And then I bring in some of my postcards as well, or other photographs, some being the Paul Thompson photographs that were adapted for the image. If you're interested in the book, also, I think visually it's very nice, partly because, in great measure, because of the work of an outstanding designer who I engaged to work on this. And he also created a book called Game Faces. You may be familiar with this book. It was this book that led me to him. His name is Antonio Alcala, and we worked together to create One Splendid Season. So if you're interested in my book, you may be interested in this and vice versa. With that, I'll just say a couple things in closing. I'm still on the lookout for originals of center panels. This one I've seen on the internet, but I could not get it in quality to include in my book. This one as well. If you have any, give a shout. If you would like a PDF of this presentation, give me a holler. Just drop me a line at this address and I'll send you a PDF. You'll lose the animation, but you'll have a PDF of each slide. And that's pretty much where I'd like to leave it. I've been rattling along here for a while, so we don't have a whole lot of time for questions, although I'm not in a hurry. Matt will let us know if we need to sign off at the hour, but thank you for your attention. I hope this has been enjoyable, and I'm happy to get any questions that you'd like to pose.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you so much, Phil. I will leave a pregnant pause right here for live questions while I'm catching up with There is one here in the chat that I'm doing a little looking over. Jason, raised your hand first. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I'm probably going to have a question later, but I was just going to say there is something so incredible about hearing about an old baseball card set from literally one of the world's experts, right? I mean, it's hard to imagine too many people know this set better than Phil. So this was just probably my favorite Saber Zoom I've been to in since Ryan Sandberg crashed one of our Chicago parties, really. So, high praise, Phil. And I'll call this a little bit of a request. Not from you, Phil. You did your job. I just think it'd be amazing if at some point we had Zooms like this for each of the classic sets, of the tobacco era, of the Gaudi era, et cetera. I mean, I'd go to all of them, 1934 Gaudi presentation, Cracker Jack presentation. So this was just absolutely amazing. And then I'll say also with the book, um, I read it a couple different ways. The first thing I did was just flip randomly through the pages, right? Just because the pictures were so cool. Um, Even if Phil had done zero research, and not written a single word, just having those high resolution scans is so worth it. To be able to just read these backs as they were written. If you're finding these cards in trading card database or other places, you usually can't even read the writing. So Phil did such a service with the high resolution scans. That alone is worth the purchase price. But then obviously everything else that Phil did just adds amazing value. So yeah, I'm just in awe. Phil, thanks for doing this for us.
Well, thank you. And I think as you sensed, and as I think everybody else can figure, this was a labor of love. You don't make money on a project like this. I don't know if I'll be in this much red or this much red, but you don't do it for that reason. You do it because you have something to say and share. And if there are people who appreciate it and enjoy it, then that's really what you look for. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Mhm. The first one we had in chat was around what I believe is a similar set, the Mecha double folders, which is a top-down fold view. Phil, were you already familiar with those
You
yourself?
know, I've seen them. I know what they look like. I know that if you open them this way, you see one player, and if you fold it down, you've got maybe the upper body of one on the legs of another.
Hmm.
They may have a certain appeal to people. They didn't grab me the way these did because of the center panels. So I'm familiar with them, but I really don't know much about them. I've never collected them.
Yeah, I have about, I don't know, 70 or 80 206s and 205s that I got from a great aunt long, long time ago.
Hmm.
And as you were presenting, it just dawned on me that I thought I had a couple folding cards and I just pulled them out and put them in the chat and the players share
Yeah.
the legs from sort of the knee down, and then you fold it, and fold it up, it's a different player. So, I,
Hmm.
I that book you had from 1960, I don't recall what
Mhm.
called it, but I'm sure it wouldn't be too hard to find out what series these bifolded cards were from. But
Yeah.
Hmm.
thanks for the presentation. Also, great resources. I linked a couple things to go dive down some rabbit holes on. So appreciate your time.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, and I'll add the image that you dropped in there. Now that we've seen some of the things that Phil helped us focus on, some of the backgrounds I can't help but see are very close matches for at least
Yeah.
the ballparks where they were. So what I'll do is I've taken some notes that will be a follow-up I'll send out to everybody who attended or who registered, and I'll include some of those same pieces of information in there
Yeah.
to for anyone who's looking for more things to look at or who wants to tie off anything mentally we've covered here. Let's see. Looks like the next question is from Steve, and he asked if you're familiar with the 1993 version that Upper Deck put out of triple folders, where they had 10 reprints from this set as well as looks like 165 new cards.
Yes, I think, God, I'm trying to think back. I think I actually bought them. I think I have them somewhere, and I was delighted to see that there was this, I think, appreciation of the design and the layout. My life kind of changed there professionally, family wise, and I that's right about the end of my collecting days.
Mhm.
And I believe I did buy them, and they're probably in a box somewhere in the attic, and I really haven't looked at them since then. Maybe you can say more about that, but I was aware of them at the time, yes.
Hi, Phil. This is Steve. Thanks again. This was awesome. I loved it. This is really enjoyable, and it makes me want to go buy a couple of these. And I'm going to try to dig mine out because mine are in a box in the attic as well. But
Mhm.
I just remember I was pretty young then, and I remember buying them and thinking, and I had seen these in a book before, the actual T202. So I thought it was pretty neat that Upper Deck put that out. I think they did a couple of things in the early '90s like that were based on older sets. But I think it must have been done. I don't know the details on it, but with the baseball assistance team or BAT, because on the side photos, there's one side photo of a player, there's a center photo or a drawing, and then on the third one, and it would alternate left or right, it would just say BAT on there for baseball assistance team. So I thought they dropped the ball a little bit. It would have been nice to have two, but they had some current players, if I remember right, and they had a lot of Mickey Mantles and Willie Mazes. I don't remember if they went back to the early 1900s, but then there were 10 reprints, and I just was flipping through them on a website, and one of them is the Tinker Evers Chance card. So
Okay,
I'm hoping,
sure.
I think they were sort of chase cards, early chase cards to find those, because I don't think I have all of those, but I know I have the whole 165.
Okay, good.
Anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
can I ask a follow up? Where's the best place to buy your book? I see it on Amazon. Is there a way that you could get some money for us buying it somewhere else?
Well, you can get it on Amazon. You can also get it at my website, which let's see if I can go back here. Um, pmrbooks.com. And if you
Okay.
go there, you'll see, so PMR, that's me, and you'll see a few other books I've written, but they have nothing to do with baseball. But / T202, you can get it there. But I will tell you that either way you buy it, the order goes to the same place. There's a fulfillment center in Michigan that has the inventory. They'll be shipped out the same way. Financially, it's slightly different, but if you're an Amazon shopper and that's easy for you, go the Amazon way. But if you go to my website, you can place an order there. Either way.
Okay. Thanks. And
Sure. Thank
did
you.
I interrupt you? Were you about to say something else on that upper deck or no? Maybe not.
I wasn't, no.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Thanks.
All right. Those are the questions I see in chat. I had a
Okay.
couple in my own pocket here, but first, let any other live questions people have, please raise your hand or go ahead and unmute and ask.
Hey Phil, it's Sean Brennan. How's it going?
Hi, Sean. So I got to say, Sean is one of the people that helped me find some of the original photographs, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That book is insane. I literally keep it by my bed and just skim through it before I go to bed about every night. I just love reading about it. I have the fortune of having an entire original set. I worked on it. I started buying them in about 2008 when the value was low. Believe it or not, these cards at that time were every card in there was easily 5 times lower than the T206 equivalent of the players. So, like
Yeah.
Christy Mathewson, Ty Cobb. I was buying Ty Cobb cards then for about 150 bucks. They've now went up pretty well in value. In fact, I really think they're starting to catch up with the average T206s in value, which is kind of unfortunate. I was loving, to buy them at a reasonable price. However, if you're wanting to buy them, I would suggest doing it as soon as possible. I do believe that they're going up in value. I think eventually they're going to get to a point where it's going to be very hard to collect a lot of them if you're on a low budget like I am, a middle class guy like myself. But at the time, I was able to put a set together in about 2 years, and really only took that long due to the rarity of cards like the one you said, like the Devlin and Maddie card. That took me a long time to find. and just coming up for the money for the Cobbs, because there's 8 Ty Cobbs in the set. It's ridiculous how many cards of the star. I'm sorry, there's 6 Ty Cobbs in the set. There's 8 Christy Mathewson. So if you're collecting T206s, you have a much easier time, but you're going to pay a lot more money for the Maddies and the T206s than you do trying to get all 8 of the Maddies and the T202s. Even the Devlin Maddie one, which is the rarest and most valuable, still is worth, in my opinion, exponentially less than any of the Christy Mathewson
Mm,
T206s, even with common backs.
mm,
I just wanted to point out a couple things, if you don't mind. One in regards to the T202 sets that have came out since then. I wanted to point out one that I was involved in. There's a company called Helmar that's on eBay. They do custom cards. And back in about 2010, the guy that runs it did a T202 set, and he asked me to write the backs for him. So if you ever see any of the T202 Helmars, I wrote the
mm,
backs. I have not looked at them since I did them, so I can't say whether I'm proud of my work. But it is kind of, in fact, I literally just brought it up while we were talking because I hadn't even looked at them in 15 years. But the cards are really neat in person. The guy
yeah,
does an incredible job of making them look vintage. Um, Another thing in regard, Phil had kind of hinted on that there is actually a 133rd card, and that is of the Johnny Evers, Jimmy Archer. I'm going to try to show it on here just by holding it up because I don't know how well this is going to go. But let's see, this card here,
whoa.
the difference between this and this is the rare card. This is the normal card. The normal Johnny Evers has a green color to it. But for some reason, and there's multiples of these, there's a turquoise Johnny Evers
Mm,
that someone could easily you could easily say was a printing error, but I have seen multiples of these, and I'm kind of the opinion that I think it should be its own card at this point.
mm,
But I don't see them very often. I happen to have 2 because whenever I see them, I buy them. But yeah, I think I came in the T202 game late. There is definitely some big time T202 collectors that I'm sure have bought up some of these.
mm,
They don't really have the value of a rare card, but honestly, I would guess that it does have a very, very, very low number. Another interesting thing about the T202s is a little secret I'm going to give away that I've held on that a lot of T202 collectors know about, but not the average person doesn't, is that the T202s have an extremely rare variation to them. See if I can show it to you on the screen here. Grab a graded one. I don't know how well you guys can see this. I'm sorry. But the rare variation is a black factory 30 on T202s. The cards in general had either black or red background or red text to them, and the black factory 30 is exponentially rarer than not only any T202 card, but any normal tobacco card that exists. My guess is that there's as few as one that exists of some of them. There's actually some of the cards I've never even seen in a Black Factory 30, and so it's very possible that they didn't even do the whole set in a Black Factory 30. But I've been lucky enough to acquire about 15 of them. I'll show you my favorite one here, which I think is the greatest baseball card of all time, Tinker Evers
mm,
Chance. Um, what impresses me about the T202 set is that somebody, whoever was putting these together at Hassan or whoever, they actually thought about these, just like Phil touched on that with having the maybe a player that was on the side panel that was in the middle panel, or at least teams connected, or managers connected, or batteries connected. Or for example, like having the Ty Cobb, Jimmy Austin middle
yeah.
panel and having one with Ty Cobb and Huey Jennings, but also having one that had Jimmy Austin on the side. Um, and this is but by far my favorite, though, that someone said, you know what, we're going to do a Tinker Evers Chance. I don't think that this is a coincidence that they
Mm,
did this way.
yeah.
The poem was already out. Everybody knew about him. In fact, they were winding down in their career. Chance was basically about out. Um, And the fact that someone thought of this is just amazing. But this is actually, if you can see, I don't know if this is coming in or not, but this is a Black Factory 30. I've only seen two of these of this card. However, the value does not match the rarity.
Hmm.
At least it hasn't for the most part. It might bring us slightly bit more than the common version, but I think it boils down to that there's not enough people collecting them, and PSA doesn't necessarily differentiate the factories. However, the rare factories in T206 all have exponential added value to them simply because of how many T206 collectors there are. And I think the T202 set's been kind of passed over, but I'm seeing the value come back. I don't know why it wasn't valuable as the T206 set in the first place, because as Phil touched on, it is amazing to actually get both uh, painting and picture in one thing. Back in the day, during the tobacco era, the majority of them were paintings. You did get some that were photos, and obviously you had photos back in Old Judge and Mayo Plug and some of the 19th century stuff, Fan Craze. But you didn't get both, and so this time you didn't have to choose between painting and picture. Because I love action photos. That's one of my favorite things. I love collecting type ones of these photos. I love looking for the photos that, like, just like Phil said. In fact, I have one. This isn't actually a type one, but this was one that I provided to Phil.
Yep.
This is
Yep.
a middle panel that shows Hans Lobert and
Yeah.
Johnny Clean. This
Uh,
actually,
Phil, just letting you know, I'm going to stop your sharing so that we can see Sean's shot in
Okay.
closer
Sure.
up.
oh
Yep.
yeah,
Yep. Yep.
sorry. Go ahead.
Oh,
Oh, there you go. Yeah, not now
Go
I can
for it.
see too. Yeah. So what this is as near as I can tell, I was at the National about 12 years ago, whenever it was a Chicago one anyway. And I found a guy that had a book, and it was a book that was distributed amongst clothing people, selling clothing, and they had these pictures inside them. This one's actually trimmed. You can see it doesn't have the full text to it. Whoever did this, I don't know why this is a miscut the way it is. But when I went to ask the guy about him, he was kind of a a-hole, and it put me off, and I just walked off. And now I regret it to this day. I wish I had taken some photos of it. I was so excited until the dealer annoyed me, and then I just left. And since then, I've never seen it before or since. I actually have the one of Frank Chance running as well. I just don't have
Yep.
it here in front of
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Um,
Those were both thanks to Sean. I was able to put those in. Thank you for that. But a little quick question for you, Sean. Do you have any reason to believe that the card 8 Birmingham's home run is a rare card, or that was
no,
you're
no.
shaking
I
your head?
think that
That's
that
my
was
sense
something that
too.
was probably what happened was someone like I always assumed it was maybe like Jack, not Jack Smalley. Who was the guy that wrote the books back in the late 70s and early 80s? They had all the checklist books. Not Jack Smalling, but oh, I can't think of his name now. But he was the one that was kind of coming up with
Yeah.
the modern value on cards whenever those books came out, and he had a great collection. And my assumption is that he had a difficult time at that time getting it. It
Yeah.
didn't really
Yeah.
translate to it was a rare card
Yeah.
because
Lou Lips had said it was rare, but I don't see why it would be. But thank you for that. Thank you.
Is
sure.
it Beckett and X you're thinking of?
I'm sorry, what?
Beckett and X, Jim Beckett and Denny X.
Yes, that
The
was the one.
checklist? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I had like when I started was in 1981, so I had their guide from 1981 to go off of. But when I started collecting these T202s, I was aware that they had said that, and then they were popping up everywhere. They're no different. In fact, I would actually say that cards like the Speaker Wood is rarer. In fact, I have an inclination to think that some of the cards were actually put out later in the series,
Hmm.
which might
Hmm.
explain why I don't find Black Factory 30s of them. And both Speaker Wood cards are one I've never seen a Black Factory 30 of. And so, anyway, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Jason, your hand is up.
yeah. Okay. I'm back with my question. First, though, I'm going to make a comment, which is, Phil, you coined the term triple unique,
Hmm.
but perhaps a missed opportunity with the Rucker Lajoie center panel. This is the double nap.
That's right.
Yeah, it's literally the only T202 I have in my entire collection.
Yeah.
But thanks to your book, I'm going to be hunting for more. Uh, the question I had for you is at least on mine, right? It's the back is Hassan cork tip cigarettes, and if I could see way better, I could probably read what the factory is, but I can't. But at any rate, um, are the backs all Hassan, or are there some kind
No,
of oddball backs? Okay, they're
no,
all.
no. They're all Hassan. And just that point about triple unique, I don't think I mentioned this. So there's 132 cards, but because there are many center panels that are not unique. They have ABC, and because there are end panels and so forth. What I wanted to do in my book, I didn't want to bombard the reader with all 132. I didn't want to show things that were redundant. So I put a spreadsheet together on Excel where I just tried to figure out what was the fewest number of cards I needed to include in the book to make sure that every end panel and every center panel was included. And the number is something like 111 or 112. So you can not show about 20 because they're redundant in some way. But there's a lot of car and there's not it's not the exact number because if you have 61A, you don't need 61B, but then you need 14A instead of 14B. So I had to play around with that. But that's when I realized there were some that were triple unique, double unique, single unique, and some that were not unique at all, and you could leave them out. So that's where that came from.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks. Phil, when we prepared for this, you mentioned that you have a couple questions yourself about it. You mentioned one of them, I think, which is what is it that led the ACC, the American Card Catalog contributors, to assign the numbers the way that they did? As you mentioned at the beginning, like, here you go, here's the T cards. They're not chronologically ordered. Baseball is just one of many subjects that the catalog covers. And you're interested in knowing whether it's someone here in this group live or whether it's someone catching this recording. Is there further insight into that as to why numbers, why they're arranged, why they were chosen? I think the T for tobacco is about as straightforward as I know. If we do have
Right.
anybody else who knows, then we'll certainly point them your way, or they can speak up right now.
Okay. Thank you. And I think
I
and the
would.
other question was I had always assumed that Burdick had put the quote checklist together,
Mhm.
but I don't see that in the book I have, and that's dated 1960. He died in 1963. So a question I would have now or at some point is, what is the earliest evidence we have of somebody compiling the checklist and saying, let's number them 1 to 76 based on the alphabetical order of the center captions, and then ABC based on the alphabetical order of the player to the left. So somebody did that at some point. I don't know who did it. It's not crucial to know, but it would be an interesting thing to round out what we know about the set.
Mhm.
Guys, I would just offer for both those questions, but especially the first. One of our members, Glenn Rennick, uh, in my mind, knows about as much about the Burdick classification system as anybody. He may not have an answer for you, but I know I've asked him at various times, why certain things got numbered certain ways, and he almost always had just a
Yeah.
really knowledgeable answer. So he might be somebody to connect with, Phil.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We mentioned in the chat that Phil has done a great interview on the My Baseball History podcast with Dan there, and that's worth a listen. They get to go in great in depth. I think, Phil, if there's anything that you can cover, I'm sure in an audio format, talking about something that's great to look at. I'm sure you guys did. I have confidence of that. There's also, Jason, was it you who put in the comparative gallery by Andrew Ehrenstein about the Paul Thompson photos?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, just
Okay.
really amazing because it's like 100 of them, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll put those links in too in the wrap up message here. I have one more, just kind of a philosophical question, Phil, that you can decide if you want to go in on or not.
Okay.
Seeing the end product here, do you think the cigarette company got what they wanted from this set? Do you feel like they published everything they cared to publish, or would there have been a reason that they actually would have stopped partway through and decided they need to move on to other things?
You're talking about this set, or are you talking about the American Tobacco Company coming
This
out
one,
with?
yeah, this one in particular. Do you think was designed in such an interesting way? It stands out from so many other tobacco issues. Would you say that they published everything they cared to publish, or do you have a sense that they stopped somewhere along the way?
I have no sense about that. I have very little insight into the marketing, why these companies put inserts of various kinds to attract what kind of business. We do know that when the government broke the trust a few years later,
Hmm.
tobacco cards pretty much stopped. So they were an effort, obviously, to get people to buy to complete a set. And what they were looking for was to stimulate sales. And I really have no insight into how effective these were. Um, I'd be curious to know. My guess is that that documentation is long since lost, and we really don't know. So I try to stick with what I have at hand, which is these cards, and I try to learn what I can about the game. But I don't really know what their objectives were. The one thing I think I hinted at,
Hmm.
but it's probably worth saying, is that Spalding was involved with the end panel portraits in that they either commissioned Paul Thompson or bought from Paul Thompson's studio to put the pictures in the guide. We
Hmm.
also know that they had a role to play with the center panel photos. I think that they either hired Van Oyen or Conlon or bought their images from their newspapers. And I didn't mention this, but I probably should have. There is some evidence that the back captions also were written by people at Spalding because there's at least a few that are verbatim taken. So my guess is that Spalding was not just contributing, they may have been given the contract to do the design and content of the set. And you'd have to imagine the American Tobacco Company, they're experts at marketing cigarettes. They're not experts at baseball or all these other things that were on card sets. So the relationship between American Tobacco Company and Spalding and how that was put together, I would love to have some insight in that, and I really don't. I don't know if anybody does.
Hmm. It's a compelling question. You know that several things have to be put in order here for this. This is much more than a one-person operation in order to create something of this quality. So
Yeah,
I'll, yeah.
and I mean, one of the people that I correspond with, and some of you may know Paul Reeferson, who's really probably the leading expert on Charles Conlon. He's actually sh towards the view now that it wasn't so much that Conlon took the pictures that were then picked up by Spalding and then used for the baseball cards. It's almost the other way around. The baseball cards asked for the pictures and Spalding or whomever then asked the photographers to take images with the intention of being used on some of these baseball cards. I don't think we know, but Paul has some ideas about how the photographs that Conlon took changed, and he's surmising the reason that they were posed differently, framed differently, was specifically because of a knowledge that they would be used in cards and they were commissioned for that purpose. I don't know that we know that, but it's a very interesting hypothesis.
Yeah, that is very interesting. All right, we are at an hour 20. We've covered a lot of great ground. Thanks to everyone for sticking around who has. Any last questions for Phil before we wrap? All right, Dixie.
Yeah, pardon my ignorance, but how can all of these photographs or whatever, how come all of these cards look like they were printed last week? I don't understand this.
Hmm.
Well, so when I got the first ones in my collection when I was 15 years old, which is 1970, and some of them were beat up, and over time I replaced them and upgraded my set. Others were in very good shape, but every one that you see here, with the exception of one, are in my collection. And then I did these high resolution scans. There are high resolution scans of the T202s in Library of Congress, but if you look at mine and you look at theirs, I think the colors in mine just pop a lot better. and I didn't enhance them in any way. I just took our home scanner. So they were very vibrant, colorful images that have reproduced very well. And so I'm pleased they come out that way because, you're right. You're looking at something that's over 100 years old, but it has a very vibrant and lively feel to it.
It's unbelievable just to see them. I mean, forget about everything else attached to them. Just to see them the way they look is amazing.
Yeah, it was a great subject, and it is amazing that they've lasted so well.
Can I mention something about the condition too that I find interesting is I think that the T202s, there's a lot of nice looking ones because I believe that people folded them and put them in something and it kept the fronts looking great. But ironically, the fold also is what screwed up a bunch of them because you would not believe how many people cut off. They would cut off the players, that which brings the value down considerably from the uncut cards. But I don't know that as a fact that's why there's so many nice ones. But that's my assumption because you didn't have that benefit with pretty much any of the other cards. Even the T201s would have been exposed to sun, in one way or another.
Mhm.
Oh yeah. I guess to build on what Sean said earlier, if you do want to build this set in as affordable as possible, you'd go after the individual end panel or center panels and end players, which is possible to do. They are saved by some people and resold that way. You'd have to have a very specific flavor of collecting, I think, to get that.
Mhm.
All right. I think we are in great shape. Thanks again for a wonderful session. And as I said, I'll send up a follow-up with the notes, questions, and answers that we have, as well as open topics we can bring up to other people and hopefully get them closed out.
Very
And
good.
yes, have a wonderful evening and especially appreciate your time very much, Phil.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for joining. And if anybody wants the PDF, I can save as a PDF and send to you. Just you can look at my email there and contact me.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Night.